The people that are just working, raising their families, don't care much about politics or don't even like politics, need to start waking up as to what's going on in our country, and particularly in our state. I think it's important that people realize this is a problem.
When the highest ranking member of the Idaho State Senate says there's a problem, might be a good time to pay attention to what he's talking about. This also wasn't the first time Senate President Pro Tem Chuck Winder drew attention to what's happening with influence at the Idaho Capitol. He made it very clear last June. The Idaho Freedom Foundation and those in the State House that follow their lead are becoming a bigger problem. And Senator Winder isn't the only one saying so. The list of legislators, both current and former, who have spoken up against the IFF has grown longer lately, which is one of the reasons we set out to do a series of stories on the nonprofit and their lobbying offshoot, of which there seems to be a lot of overlap. After hearing what Senator Winder said and watching education budgets get cut over a concept nobody could prove existed in Idaho, which was one of the reasons the 2021 session wound up as the longest ever, by the way, we wanted to ask the question, why? Throughout all of last session, we were told it was because of critical race theory being taught in Idaho schools, from pre-K all the way to college. Now, critical race theory is a concept that examines how racism isn't just an individual bias, but also how it's rooted in legal systems and policies. It's supposed to be about recognizing it and fixing it with the goal of making us a better country. It's really law school level scholarship stuff, though. So is it really permeating through Idaho's pre-K, elementary, high schools, and universities? One group was able to convince enough lawmakers to make it seem so, the Idaho Freedom Foundation.
I think we need to talk about social justice ideology.
It's something Idaho's legislature did talk about a lot last session.
So when people say that they haven't heard about it, well, it's been creeping in for a little while.
In some form or another.
This indoctrination is, she said, it's like a poison in these schools.
Critical race theory makes students feel bad or inferior or superior, sometimes based on the color of their skin.
In fact, critical race theory, or social justice ideology, or the combined critical social justice, was even the basis of an entire bill in 2021.
This bill needed to be passed years ago. This has been creeping through our schools forever.
Representative Heather Scott claimed a substitute teacher in the Boise area told her this.
To Kill a Mockingbird, she said the message was made clear. White people are bad, black people are innocent victims. And the students were encouraged to believe that there's an endless era of black victimization.
However, is reading a book about a black man being falsely accused of raping a white woman in Jim Crow-era Alabama really teaching critical race theory? Scott offered another anecdote from the same substitute teacher.
And the books that kind of talk about the founding of this country, she said it's been riddled with writings from third world experiences by authors that are completely unheard of, but they are a non-white race.
Representative Ron Nate suggested his own anecdotal evidence.
This is a school board member seeing it going on in their school. It says, critical race theory demonizes white kids for being white. It teaches that whiteness is a privilege and something students should feel guilty about and apologize for.
Meanwhile, on the Senate side, there was a struggle to even define it.
Do you have a definition for critical race theory?
Critical race theory is a formal academic discipline. If you were to Google it, you would find abundant descriptions of what is contained in it.
I've yet to see a definition, and so I wondered if you had one.
No clear definition or definitive evidence of discrimination.
Can you tell me, give me any examples of actions in Idaho that would have violated any part of Section 33-138?
You know, I hesitate to be specific, having not brought evidence in front of me that I can provide documentation of.
Despite that,
clerk will unlock the machine and the members will record their votes.
House Bill 377, an act relating to dignity and non-discrimination in public education,
House Bill number 377,
passed overwhelmingly.
So we transmitted to the Senate.
And made the teachings of tenets, often found in critical race theory, illegal in Idaho.
Don't tell me that's not ever going to happen in Idaho.
About 2 months earlier, there was this debate in the House.
Why are we providing preschoolers, little developing children, information on how to help them with social justice curriculum.
A $6 million federal grant for pre-K education in Idaho, the same one approved the year before, was facing the same scrutiny.
The goal in the long run is to be able to take our children from birth and to be able to start indoctrinating them.
You're voting for social justice ideology to be given through grant money to our little ones.
Say no to social justice being taught in Idaho preschools. A federal grant is the opposite of caring.
But if you ask those who actually worked with the grant?
Critical race theory, is that going to be taught to kids aged through 0 through 5?
No.
I'm sorry, it's hard for me not to laugh about it, Brenda.
I just want to make sure that people are clear that when we have a 3.5-hour program, we are busy wiping noses, making sure that shoelaces are tied, putting crayons, pencils, and scissors into the hands of young children.
The grant would have been a big benefit to rural communities and families. Yet enough lawmakers were persuaded, so the attempt to secure $18 million over 3 years
26 has failed to pass the House.
Failed twice. On top of that,
A gender equity center at Boise State University, multicultural student services center at Boise State University.
The legislature cut $2.5 million from the higher education budget.
University of Idaho Office of Multicultural Affairs, a women's center, LGBTQA office.
Claiming they were no longer going to fund programs they considered critical race theory.
We are spending thousands, millions of dollars on critical race theory and social justice promotion in our universities.
Boise State took the biggest hit, losing $1.5 million.
I think we have a lot of evidence that there is this is occurring in our colleges.
But was there?
It's being thrown out there like a boogeyman that we have under our children's bed. And the reality is it might scare them, but it's not real.
After their budgets were cut, both BSU and U of I hired a law firm to conduct its own investigation into these claims. In both cases, they found no evidence to back up any of the allegations.
In short, the entire social justice narrative on which the University of Idaho was penalized $500,000 was a false narrative created by conflict entrepreneurs who make their living sowing fear and doubt with legislators and voters.
The thing is, there wasn't really any evidence provided to prove any of these things were being taught in Idaho schools.
The Board of Education does not support indoctrination of any kind and at any level, and I haven't talked to anyone that does.
So what was the basis for this bad information?
Good afternoon, fellow Idahoans. This is another edition of Fiscal Fridays with Fred.
Most point to the Idaho Freedom Foundation.
College and university budget, and it's significant for a number of reasons.
Their website and YouTube channel are chock full of essays and videos. Left-wing claiming Idaho schools are chock full of critical race theory.
Indoctrinate Idaho kids from cradle to college.
With teachers trying to indoctrinate your children.
So they're promoting critical race theory, they're promoting critical queer theory, critical social justice.
I mean, it's not just in Idaho, and it's not just in our colleges and universities, but it's also in our elementary, middle, and high schools.
They even offer suggestions to legislators on how to handle it.
And the best way for them to get the attention of these universities that are pursuing the social justice agenda is to reduce the appropriation by the amount of the social justice spending or something close to that.
Thus, the $2.5 million reduction in university budgets. A small step toward the ultimate goal of the IFF.
You know, the thing about the IFF is that they're on record as not believing any money should be going to public education in the state of Idaho. And so their goal really is to defund public education in the state of Idaho.
I mean, that's clear. They're clear. They don't want public education, so they're doing everything they can to ignite fear in a unreasonable, irrational way, so we can basically, dissect it and destroy it.
That's quite a shift for an organization that started out in 2009 as a nonprofit think tank dedicated to Idaho issues.
I think a lot of people supported the idea of let's have a conservative, think tank in Idaho and let's bring the issues forward and have the discussions. And
we spoke with Senate President Pro Tem Chuck Winder right before the 2022 session. And he says he's seen the IFF change over the last 5 years or so.
It's become more of a political movement than it was a think tank.
Along with an affiliation with the State Policy Network, a nationwide chain of like-minded groups, that transformation coincides with the 2016 creation of the Idaho Freedom Action, the lobbying arm of the IFF, which uses the same offices and staff.
They bring in different issues that are going on in other parts of the country and say, well, we can't ever let this happen in Idaho. And they go after people that say, well, it's not happening in Idaho. The biggest challenge to me is the impact they're having on individual legislators. Idaho Freedom Foundation can do anything they want to do. But I think when they start influencing the vote of a block of people, and those people want an A rating, I think that's wrong.
That A rating Winder is talking about comes from the IFF's Freedom Index. The group grades lawmakers based on how they vote on bills and whether that lines up with the IFF's beliefs. A low score might mean you're against freedom.
So it's here.
Coincidentally,
That's being taught down here.
those voices heard the loudest during education funding debates
So we do have this occurring.
happen to have some of the highest scores on the Freedom Index.
To promote critical race theory, you must vote against this budget.
If they want to rate senators, if they want to rate bills, do it after they've had a chance to vote. Don't tell people how to vote.
Do you have evidence or whatever proof that they've actually communicated with legislators in the middle of a session?
Well, I mean, I think you can ask anybody around this building. They'll change their ratings in the middle of a hearing. They'll send out text messages. They'll send out emails, encouraging and telling people how they should vote. And
legislators?
Yes, why they're in committees.
For Senator Winder, it was enough of a problem to offer this review of the 2021 session.
I think my greatest disappointment is how many legislators are willing to follow the directions of the Idaho Freedom Foundation. That's one of the biggest threats we have to our democracy in our state is we've got a small group of people that are very vocal, that are very aggressive towards anyone that doesn't agree with them.
6 months later, the senator still feels the same. Do you believe that they are a threat to the democracy in Idaho?
I believe they are because I think if they were an honest broker in this process, they wouldn't be telling people how to vote. Each individual is elected by their districts to represent their constituents, not to represent a special interest group.
By no means is the Idaho Freedom Foundation the only special interest group hanging around the State House. But as we just heard and saw, there aren't too many out there that have derailed a legislative session like they did last year, based on a false narrative. Just looking over their website, they have more than 30 videos dedicated to critical race theory in Idaho schools dating back to January of 2021. More than 100, and I stopped counting at 110 with an article dated October 2019. More than 100 articles about education in Idaho and indoctrination in our schools, many of which were used directly as evidence by lawmakers. Now, this is the part of the story where we tell you, yes, we did reach out to the Idaho Freedom Foundation to ask them about all of this. And we wanted to do it on camera because, well, we're a visual medium, a television station, and on-camera interviews, kind of what we do. Well, they declined. Actually, they asked for an hour of airtime, unedited. I mean, we're television, but we're not public access television. We also tried to speak with several lawmakers who you saw in the story and those who have high scores on their Freedom Index, and none of them accepted our invitation either. Which kind of plays into this other problem brought up by Senator Winder and the others, a lack of transparency by the IFF. They seem to call for it from others, he says, but don't provide it when it comes to things like financial support of their nonprofit. They don't legally have to, but that's just one of the elements that we're going to be getting into over the next couple of days. And Morgan Romero joins us now. She did a lot of the heavy lifting with this story, with this series and this investigation. We're also going to be getting into some of these aspects we talked about, this Freedom Index. That's the next installment.
Yeah, so tonight on the news at 10, I'm going to be diving into the Freedom Index. It is, as you discussed, it's a system, it's a scorecard where they rank bills and then they rank lawmakers based on how they vote for those bills. And what we're hearing from a lot of people in the legislature, current state leaders and former state leaders, is that this scorecard really does weigh heavily on the bills that gets passed and the work that gets done in Idaho's legislature. And they use people's scores, as you said, how they vote on freedom against them in primary elections as well.
And very quickly, part 3 dives into this IFF versus the IFA part.
Exactly. They have the IFF, which is a nonprofit charitable organization, and then they have IFA, Idaho Freedom Action, which is their lobbying arm. A lot of people calling foul and saying that essentially the lines are really blurry. And so we dive into, is what they're doing legal?
All right, looking forward to it very much, Morgan. Part 2 of our investigation into the Idaho Freedom Foundation tonight on the news at 10. Part 3 Back here tomorrow on the 208.